Hello, everyone. I hope you are having a fantastic day so far, and I am so excited because today I am continuing my series of seasonal book recommendations with 10 books that I am recommending to you for winter. Winter is the perfect time of year, in my opinion, to find that book that is your next favorite book. So I'm going to give you a few of my recommendations that, if you haven't checked them out, I definitely think you should because they are either some of mine that became my favorites in the winter time or they give that nice cozy, wintry holiday vibe. To start off, we're going to do one of my favorites from when I was a kid. And this book is Christmas in Camelot. Now, I love this story no matter what format you get it in. This one that I have right here is the deluxe holiday edition. So it has some really cool illustrations. It has that storybook style, which I think brings back a lot of nostalgia for a lot of people in the holiday season. This particular story has some really cool Arthurian mythology tied into it because that is kind of a background theme in a lot of the Magic Treehouse books. In this one, it takes more of a precedence. And as a kid, I was fascinated with this story. I'll be honest, I read it multiple times, not just at the holidays, but any time of the year. But it definitely does give that cozy holiday feel. My next book recommendation is a newer one for me, but one that I thought was perfect to include with these today. And it is Letters from Father Christmas by J.R.R. Tolkien. It is a collection of letters that Tolkien's children received from Father Christmas over the years. It feels very fantastical and whimsical, especially for the holiday season. And Tolkien to me is someone whose work I really admire, but it is definitely more not intense, but just more of a high fantasy kind of vibe, not like whimsical kind of fantasy. So to have that kind of difference in this book compared to some of his other ones is really cool. And since it's a collection of things, it also has a different kind of format. But I've started reading this and it's been really fun so far. And so I think you would enjoy it as well. Next, we have one of my favorite books from when I was a kid and so formative for what I love now as a reader. And that is The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis. I mean, just looking at this cover, it gives all the wintry vibes. And if you know anything about this story, you know that the like first half of the story really takes place in a wintry setting. And Father Christmas does make a little appearance in this book, but it's so good. And for me, at least, brings back a lot of nostalgia. I really identified with the character of Lucy as a kid, and still, even today as an adult, a lot of the things about Lucy I still see in myself, which I think is really cool. But if you have not read this book, I definitely recommend it. And if you have read this book, give it a reread in the winter because it's a great time to read it. Next is a book that I read earlier this year, and it is The Wood at Midwinter by Susanna Clark. First of all, look at this cover. It is beautiful and magnificent. And this story was such a quick read. I literally think I read it in less than an hour, but it was so captivating and so well written. The main character has these really interesting interactions with some different animals in the story. And for it being so short, it really makes you think about a lot of things. And for that reason, I think it would be a great thing for you to read. If you haven't read this year, quick read on an afternoon that's a little cold, a little dreary. Just pick this up, read it. I definitely think you will enjoy it. Next, we have another book that I really loved as a kid, and it is The Watsons Go to Birmingham 1963 by Christopher Paul Curtis. This book not only won the Newbery Medal, but it also won the Coretta Scott King Award for very good reason because this story is so important and so well done. When I was a kid, my mom would always check out audiobooks for us to listen to on long road trips, and this was one of them. And it's just such a good story, but there are some really important parts of it that take place in winter, which is why I specifically have it in this book recommendation. You could read it any time of year, but because of some important story elements that take place in the winter, I definitely would recommend that you read this sometime this season. The next book in this recommendation, I do not have a physical copy of, but I will put a picture of it in over here, and that is Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie. This is one of her Poirot mysteries. I really hope I said his name right. I may not have. It's okay. Agatha Christie is a brilliant writer, point blank, period. She's fantastic. But this particular mystery has a lot of wintry elements in it, having to do with this group of people that are traveling on the Orient Express and then the murder that happens thereafter. I feel like a lot of the time in winter, it makes you more introspective, and for some people, a feeling of like solitude can be a little overwhelming at times. I know I feel that sometimes in the winter time. But this story, I feel like, really does a good job of going in those two spaces of the solitude and reflectiveness of winter, but then also something else that you can find in winter, which is community and a sense of belonging with a group of people, even an unlikely group of people, as you find in Murder on the Orient Express. It's been adapted into many different film and TV adaptations, but I also recommend finding either a physical copy of the book or an audiobook that you can hear to enjoy that version of the story. Now, moving on to books that may not explicitly talk about winter, but still give that kind of vibe. The next book I have is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. I love this book. It is one of my favorite books. And just everything about it gives me a wintry vibe. And I don't really know how else to explain it other than that, but it just does. And Addie herself is a very solitary person. So maybe that is part of the big reason. But it is a really interesting story. It is more of a slow paced story. So if you're a person that's not really big on slow paced stories, then you may not super enjoy this. I think it's worth it. Even if you are that kind of person, just give it a chance. Give it a chance because it is really good. And by the end of it, you will be glad that you read it. I just realized the next several books are also favorites of mine, and I didn't do that intentionally, but such is life sometimes. This is The Lost Apothecary by Sarah Penner. This is one of those books that I first fell in love with, kind of the time hoppiness of a story that's well done. Because for a long time I said I didn't like books like that, but this and several others that I've read recently, and by recently I mean in the past few years, changed my mind about that. The story is very engaging, kind of the earlier years, I should say, is what gives me more of that wintry vibe of like the dark and dreary London vibe, you know what I mean? But it's a really great story. I love how it ends. Does have that very just wintry vibe to it. So if you have not read this one, I would also recommend that you read it too. You know, sometimes when you're talking to yourself and you feel like you say the same thing over and over again, that is how I feel right now. And I hope that it doesn't come off too repetitive. Just very self conscious, very self aware. And we love that. That's awesome. And I'm also distracted because my cat is very cutely sleeping on my bed. She was chaotically running around earlier and now she's just chilling. And what a life to live, you know? Anyways, the next two books, which are the last two books in my recommendations, are both by Alice Hoffman. Are we surprised? No, because your girl talks about Alice Hoffman all the time. So, without further ado, this is The Red Garden by Alice Hoffman. Now, I originally got this book when I went to a bookstore with my best friend, and we were looking at the bargain books that they had on like a shelf outside in the front, and she found two Alice Hoffman books, and she knows that I love Alice Hoffman, so she grabbed this one for me as well as another one. I picked it up just intending to read it as like a time filler for something that I was having to wait on, and really got engaged with the story. It's so interesting because there are multiple years that are covered in the span of this story and multiple characters that are covered in the span of this story. So each chapter is almost like a vignette of each of the characters, but they all tie together. And the Red Garden in this town becomes kind of a character in and of itself in the story, which I think is really interesting. It's really good. It gives that wintry vibe. And I don't know about you, but I really like a story that I can read and be engaged with, but then I can put it down. And if for some reason, whether life is busy as it can be in the holiday season or something else, I can pick it up with however much time has passed. And I know exactly where I was because of how the author formatted the story. And that's how this one is. So I definitely recommend that you read this one. And my last book recommendation is Magic Lessons by Alice Hoffman. This is the prequel to Practical Magic. I am also really into historical fiction, which again, if you have been here for a while, you know, it's true. But I loved this book. This was actually the first one that I read out of the Practical Magic series, and I read it in January when I did. This was several years ago. So I think that's probably why it gives me that wintry vibe. But anytime I think about this book and I think about the story of Maria Owens and how she came to America and all these things, it just gives me a wintry vibe that I can't explain. But no matter what time of year it is, I think especially in winter. But for you, whenever, if you have not read the Practical Magic series, I recommend reading them in chronological order. So starting with this one, going all the way to the Book of Magic. So this one, Rules of Magic, Practical Magic, Book of Magic in that order, because I think it helps you track with everybody. If you want to read them in release order, you can do that as well. Either way, it's a really great series. This is a really great part of that series, and I definitely think you would enjoy it. So, those are my 10 book recommendations for winter. If you have any wintry recommendations that you would like to send my way, please leave them in the comments below. I often find that some of my favorite books that I read, I find in the wintry months. So, I would love to be able to read one of your recommendations, and who knows, maybe it'd be one of my new favorites. I hope you have a fantastic day. Happy reading, and I will see you next time. Bye.